So I'm going to continue to try to implement the signals. I talked to ChatGPT about it, and I decided to create another class because I think it makes more sense. Because I didn't like, so I asked ChatGPT about the engine class, the reason why it has Godot has two different engine classes, and the response that it gave me is because one of the classes was designed for configurations and the other for more. Uh, one of the classes was designed to interact with the scripting languages, and the other one was for the configurations on the engine. And based on the code there, I think that, and also ChatGPT said this as well when I asked. I think that it makes more sense to couple them or to put those two classes together. But I'm not really sure if I'm going to do that. I might try to do this after I implement the signals. But this was one of the reasons, and the other one is because I do think that it's just a lot easier to think about it if I separate everything into its own class. But yeah, I'm not really sure if it's gonna work. And yeah, I think that the way that I'm gonna test this is just by implementing these functions here. I still haven't decided this exactly how it's gonna work with the subscription and the like. The main thing that I don't know is the order, if the order matters or not, of who connects and emits. Obviously, it matters because like if you emit and the receiver is not connected, then it's not gonna do anything. But I'm not really sure if like this is very high priority, and I have to think about like a way to make sure that you always connect first or not. So the conclusion that I got is just that it's better to just implement first. Then once I see if it works, then I can think about whether or not I should change. As for the stuff that I'm gonna do, probably it doesn't matter the order because it's mainly gonna be for GUI elements. So the moment that like let's say the game or the application loads, everything should already be connected. So it doesn't matter that much to reinforce the connection. So hopefully, so the conversation is here that I had with. I'm gonna put this timer here. The end of this timer, I'm gonna stop. So basically, I asked. Yeah, this was the thing that was annoying me because I would have to implement on both of the configurations, and I wasn't sure which one is which or which one. Like if I could implement on only one of the engine classes, the main one is the one that is on the core bind, and the other one seems to be the one that they created later. I still don't understand why they did it like this, but I definitely think that this can be simplified to just put everything on the same class. I think it makes a lot more sense. So this one, it only has 5 functions that don't call the engine, the other engine class, and 4 of them are these ones that are related to the script server, and the other one is just getting the main loop. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to me for them to be separated. So I might try to put them together at some point. It's basically from here. But now, and I think that it makes more sense. I was thinking about it. Where should I put these other files here? I'm not really sure if it makes sense the way that I'm doing now, but I decided to just put on the same folder as the object it is, because the other emit signals are inside of the object class. So I think it makes sense to put these other ones here. And basically what I'm going to do is just create this class. And I'm going to do the same thing that I was thinking about doing with the engine, but with this class instead. So I have to think about where should I. So first I'm going to finish this function here. Then after that, I have to think about what is the best place to initialize this class. And there's other problem here. I was gonna do this, just comment this stuff out, because based on the object, it doesn't subscribe the emit signal classes. It only subscribes this emit signal one, which is a variation of the other one, but the one that it uses, it doesn't subscribe on class DB. So I guess it's not supposed to be exposed. And there's another thing that I was thinking about, because one of the main things that you can do on the editor is to change the scripting functionality. And based on the way that I'm doing things now, I'm not going to be able to do that because it forces you, the editor forces you to choose either GDScript or C#. So I might have to try to change the language there that shows on the viewports or figure out a way. But I think that it doesn't matter that much because that comes later anyway. So for now, I'm not gonna bind the methods. So I'm just gonna create this class. Yeah, I have to see what happens if I don't bind. And this one I basically changed. So the main reason for having this just makes it easier to. This one is the one that is going to be called, and it accepts the arguments as a template, variadic template, and then it passes to the other one with the count. So I just thought it's easier to copy the way that they did there. And this one calls this one, and then I just copy the error message here. So basically, if the signals don't have the scope when you emit, it returns, and if they don't have the signal from the scope, then it returns as well. But if both of these are true, then I just loop over the list of callables. This is another thing I was thinking about, as I think that it's probably better to use a queue, but the only queue that they have is the message queue, which is used on callbacks on the middle of the iteration cycle, and I thought that it would be a lot more complicated to implement that, so I'm just gonna make it a lot easier, because it shouldn't be that hard to change if I want to later on. So I just decided to use this list here of callables, and then I'm looping over, accessing the scope. Yeah, so this is the one that I have to think about now. So here I'm accessing the ones that were subscribed. Obviously, if both of these conditions are true, then it means that there is a list there. Because it's gonna be the first one, I'm gonna put here. So first scope. Then the second key is gonna be signal name. And then the other one. So the last part there, I'm accessing this list of callables, and then I'm looping over the list, and I'm calling the method that the callable subscribed. So I have to think about. So probably the best idea is to just look for, because I've seen it a lot how they initialize this stuff, but I don't I don't know how to do it. I have to remember. I think it's probably better to go for a class and then see a member variable of the class and see if they initialize that. I'm looking for an example that can allow me to understand what is not the best way, but the correct way to initialize the list there, to connect the thing. So obviously the first time that it calls, I'm gonna check to see if I first check to see if the scope exists. If it doesn't, I just create the other I have to create a hash map. So basically I have to clarify what is the correct way to allocate the memory there. Oh, another thing that I realized now is that they have this comment here and they even agree that this is not very good. So basically the reason why they did this is because of C++. Yeah. Also, I can look into the signal function because I know they initialize the connections there. Oh, this is another thing that I have to think about implementing, but I don't think I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna test everything first, and if it works, then I think about this. Just disconnect events. But basically, I'm just gonna copy the way that they did it, and then adjust for the stuff that I have there. I think the only difference, like there are two different things that like are the main things. One is the instead of using this structure on the object, I'm using a global structure, which will be on the class. So it's like a centralized thing. The class is a singleton, and I'm just gonna copy the patterns from the other class. And then I'm checking on that class instead to see if it has the signals. And the other difference is just the amount of data that these data structures here they are used to keep track of their connections. So here they just initialize like this. They don't use memnew. So I guess memnew is just mainly for classes, probably. Initialize the classes. So I'm gonna try just to copy the way that they do here. Actually, I can look. It's probably better to look into a list instead of a function. Yeah, I think that they just initialize like this. And then I need a hash as well. Oh, first I need the callable. I'm passing the callable here. I think that maybe on the constructor of this, because the thing that I'm thinking about is since that's the way that they initialize on the functions there, I think it makes sense that the thing will be on the heap. But I don't understand why. It's probably because it's a part of the class. So like the function that is called is part of the class. The class was initialized with the memory pool. Doesn't have anything. This is way just to try. And basically here is the same thing, but I think I should create outside of the scope. So I should create this thing here, and then just use this one. I think just push. So obviously this depends on the order I want. Sure, the signal should be called. It probably matters, but not that much. So I think it makes more sense the ones that are added first should be called first. But I'm not really sure which order that will be if I so push back probably is the one. And because the way that I imagine is like similar to a vector, but is obviously connected through pointers because of linked list. So I think just push back might be callable. The main concerns that I have is related to memory because like if I get an error, it's gonna be annoying to figure out. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. This is the thing there. So the best way is to just look for the other function that they, because on the other one they allocate memory, but it's just in case the object doesn't exist anymore. And I think that's on the when they're emitting the events. So I might have to change this. I am thinking about it. I was thinking about, so they have this special thing here. Oh, it doesn't go back. Hmm. So let me see. It basically is on their Discord on the engine topic. They have a, maybe if I just, they have a link to this website, which is another forum that they have. But it's just, this one is just for people that are going to contribute to the engine. But I am thinking about, because the thing is, like the reason why I don't want to contribute is because I'm gonna have to spend a bunch of time figuring out the like how to deal with GitHub stuff, and I don't want to spend time thinking about this. But I am thinking about asking them whether or not there's a problem, like explaining what I'm trying to do, and then asking because mainly the thing that I'm curious about is the engine, because I want to understand if there is like what is the reason behind the way that it is now, so that I don't try to change and then end up breaking a bunch of things. Because the hardest thing here, and the reason why I'm thinking about this now is because like one of the benefits of studying this is that it has been tested by a bunch of people. So a bunch of people use, and then they find errors, and then they submit issues. So it becomes easier to see what are the possible mistakes that can happen. So here I'm thinking about that I might make this, and then it works for what I'm doing, but then there is a problem that I'm not aware of, which in this case would be like the creating memory thing. So, which can become a problem for my use case as well at some point, and then it becomes harder to figure out what it is. So mainly I'm thinking about this now to see if it's worth it to spend time just copying the way that they do there to allocate memory. So I think it's on the when they emit the signal that they have something there. That they create this temporary thing here is they use this macro to create these slots. They're basically copying the data from the signal data, which is the object on the, it's a member variable on the object class that holds the data for the signal. So, and there was an error that when you emit the signal and the object is destroyed, because I think that this happens because Godot is they use multiple threads, so, but I'm not really sure if that's the case why it happens. It might be. Yeah, it has to be, I think. Because at the moment the signal is being called here, the object is destroyed at the same time, and then it causes this issue. But I'm thinking about whether or not, in the case that I have there, if that makes sense or not, because the events are going to be global. Mainly the place that I can think about that the objects would be destroyed, that is another question that I had now. I'm not really sure, is when you change between scenes. I don't know if the standard behavior is true. I think it isn't, because the way the mental model that I have now is everything's gonna be on the scene tree. But it might be actually, because there is some parts there when you're stepping over. There is an event on the node class that is emitted when the node is destroyed. So obviously one thing I can do is just put the breakpoints there and see. But I think that's more for when you wanna change. But it is still a situation where it's probably gonna remove the node. So for example, when you're displaying the pop-up, you're gonna add, you might add nodes to the tree and then remove them. But the annoying thing about this is that figuring out because the way that I don't like the way that they did the information here. It's like very complicated. I think here basically they're looping over this slot map, which is probably hash map. It's probably hash map that holds this. Signal data is another struct that has this other slot here. And they're creating a callable from this. So they are basically accessing the callable from that stuff and creating another one. Allocating to this based on the size. So in my case would be creating from the list here. So access the list from the hash map there. And create the stuff. And maybe it is worth doing this. It's better to test first than if I see if I see it works, then I think about. Because there are other things that can be a problem, so it's just gonna be make it harder to figure out. Here I should put the other stuff that they put there. And it should return as well. I'm gonna put this stuff here as well. Yeah, now I think I have everything. So basically just gonna call the callable that was stored from the connection that you put there. And then the way that I'm gonna pass the callable is just by using the macro as well. And so now the main thing that I have to think about. Oh, let me think about this. So I'm calling the function that was subscribed with the data that is being passed through the emit signal. So I think it doesn't matter. I'm just gonna test to see, because obviously there can be situations where we end up creating the function with the wrong kinds of arguments. So this can be a problem, but since I'm doing pretty much the same thing that they are doing there, and the only thing that I'm not doing is this check to see if it is valid, but because the way that I'm thinking about now is not integrating this with the scripting language. I want to do, I don't like the idea of using GDScript or C Sharp. Like if I was gonna do, if I was gonna use a scripting language, I think I prefer using Python. I think it makes more sense. And then for using Python, probably you can do it with the GD extension. So I think that makes a lot more sense. The most annoying thing about this is that I might have to figure out how to, I'm probably gonna have at some point to figure out how to change the engine. But I'm not really sure if that's necessary because I can always, yeah, but the thing is about, like if you change from the source code, then the problem is that you have to compile every time. You have to close the editor, compile, change the code, compile, and then open again. So you would be better to show from the editor, but the purpose of the editor is not to show the files from the engine. The purpose is to show the files from the project. So that's the problem. And this was something I was thinking about uh, when I was in the beginning, thinking about where I would put the Burma thing. I thought about putting the projects on the same folder as the engine and making a part of the thing. But obviously, the reason why it isn't like this is because like they're created for different purposes. So it makes sense that you allow people to create the project wherever they want. But I think I can think about a way to maybe use the functionality they have to, because on the editor you can add signals on the right. There you just click on the signal, or right click on the signal, and then you select an option to connect, and you can connect two different classes through that. But I think that connect only works for if you're using GDScript. So what I can do is just see if I can change the functionality to depending on what kind of node is using. Or I can, yeah, I can figure out a way to, from the class, this class, but this is the problem, because I think if I want to have access, then I have to register everything here. So if I want to have access to the signals there, I have to bind the methods here. And the question is I think that the reason why they don't bind on the object is because the purpose is for you to have access to the scripts from the GDScript. So it's like the same concept of having a member variable that is a private class, a private member variable inside of the class, and then changing the private member variable through public functions. So like you limit the scope of access. But I think that's, let me think about this stuff here and see if everything is correct. I don't think about the other stuff. So I think this one is probably just a copy of the other one, so it's unlikely there's something. Oh, they should. So how is it in here? Oh, so this one I forgot to put the scope. And then I have to change there. Yeah, now I think it's correct. So it just passes scope, signal, then arguments, and the counts. So first I check to see if the scope exists. If it doesn't, I return. Then I check to see if the signal exists. Return. And if they both exist, I just loop over the list, get the callback. Check to see if it's valid. Call the function from the callback. I have to change this stuff here. So get object is probably gonna get the instance. That's so when you create the callable, you pass the instance, and then the callable holds the information inside of the class. So this is probably getting that object. And then it's checking to see if it exists on the class DB. Or it's checking to see if the method is invalid. So probably the error is captured through here. So if you create a, because I have to keep in mind that, and it's gonna work in the same way. So yeah, in the example that I'm thinking about, I'm gonna connect through the graph nodes that I created. So I'm gonna create a function here, and then the function is gonna have, probably I'm gonna make it part of the memory variables here. So this one, I'm just gonna copy there from, I think it's gonna be floats. I'm gonna open the software thing, just see to remember. It's gonna be data. Additional constants. So basically I'm gonna use these member variables to calculate everything on the solvers. So from the function, I'm gonna create this now already. So this one I would have to get the data. Yeah, I have to think about how I'm gonna structure this. I'm gonna do an example first because it's easier, but I'm thinking about because obviously I have all that. I don't want to create a function for each thing that I'm gonna do. That doesn't sound good. So like because then it doesn't scale. If I have to create a different function for each metric that I show here. So obviously it's better to create only one function. And then the problem is that I'm gonna have to use variadic templates as well, I think. But then it becomes annoying because of C++. But I guess I could do it like this and then just check to see. So just loop over the arguments and then I do a switch statement, or probably switch is not better, it's not good inside of the loop. It's probably better to use if else. Yeah, and then I check to see. So I pass the values as. Yeah, this is the thing because it wouldn't make sense to pass as a string name. Yeah, so I have to think about how I'm going to synchronize these things. It's mostly annoying because of C++. Because everything is harder. So one thing that I'm thinking about is obviously using default arguments. So like this is the best way probably is to just use like you just use all the arguments there and then just pass as just make default ones, default values. But then the issue is I don't think that's very good because I would have to make it equal to the same like the initial value of each thing, and that wouldn't be very good. Because then if you change, then you call the function again, it fucks up. And I don't want to use something like 0 as the default value to indicate that the value wasn't sent. So I think probably looping over the values is better, but then I have to figure out how to. It's probably gonna be probably have to use the same function that they use there on the methods. Just gonna use dynamic, or it's gonna use some std member std function to figure out the type of the arguments. So I guess I can. So I have to remember to. Because the thing is, from what I've seen mostly, from the signals I've seen, they mostly pass string names. So what happens if you want to pass integer or something like that? I have to look into more examples and then see what the relationship between the well, obviously I'm just gonna do an example there, so it doesn't have to be just to see if it's gonna work. Then I think about this. There's gonna be another problem figuring out. So I'm just gonna put an integer here. or actually a float. But I think I'm gonna have to do I'm gonna have to see to test because now I don't remember if I ever seen a place where they pass a value other than a string name. But that's the way that I'm imagining now is that so you can emit whatever signal without as long as it is subscribed obviously by one thing at least because if it doesn't you can emit anyway because it's just not gonna do anything. But if it is subscribed to at least if it is at least one place subscribed to that event, then it doesn't matter where you emit the event, it's gonna run the functions you have on the list there. And the idea is to transfer the data from the arguments of the function that emits the event to the function that connected to the thing, because that allows you to not need the references, the connection of references between the different objects. That's the whole point. So you're just routing everything. You're just routing the data to the centralized class, which is this class here. So that's the idea. I think this doesn't matter that much to change because it's probably gonna be the same thing because I'm using the same function there. So I think that, yeah, but I have to spend more time studying how this works because obviously here is gonna, I have to understand more how those conversion between types, and I'm trying to avoid this because I know it's really annoying, C++, but I think there's not gonna be anything I can do. I have to spend more time to understand more how it works so it becomes easier to reason about what is the best way because I have to synchronize. So like the biggest problem is synchronizing the types between the different locations. Because one thing that feels kind of could be dangerous is, but I'm only doing this way because it's the way that they did it. So I think it must make sense because they chose this way. So the trickiest thing is that they are not coupled. Maybe it is different because the way that they check to see whether or not the event exists is on the object. So like, let's say we have an application, for example, you have a bunch of different events on a bunch of different places. So it becomes kind of hard to like remember, or for the person that is trying to understand the application, not the person that builds, what kind of arguments the signal is going to emit and what function, and to make sure that the function that receives the arguments, like the types are the same, and the type resolution. And what happens when you have a situation like this where you want, in this case, I want to be able to, I think it's easier to just, it is not scalable if I have to do a unique function for each argument here, so it makes a lot more sense to make the arguments flexible, the amount of arguments, by using the spreader operator. But then it becomes a problem because how am I going to synchronize there? Because the logic of the function that receives the data is going to be directly related to this, which is probably going to be a loop, like I said, and then use a bunch of if else to check to see if the arguments were passed on the emit signal, and then only updates the values that were passed. That's kind of the idea that I have. But then there's two main problems. One is it's gonna be defaults, because I know this is kind of annoying in C++. I'm not really, I think you can do default arguments, but because of the types, it becomes more annoying. So like one idea, but these default arguments is still not very good as well, because it has to be something that keeps track of the last change that was made. Because if I put the default arguments as the default values here, then obviously after someone makes a change, the next time that someone's gonna call, it might fuck up the simulation because it's just gonna return the ones that were not updated to the previous values, which doesn't make sense. So I think I can't really do default arguments. So it has to be pass in the, or the type of the function that is going to receive could be the same, but then if I want the type of the function that is going to be called when you emit the event should be the same as the type of the emit signal. where it allows an arbitrary. Yeah, I have to understand the type of his resolution there on the function that does the call. That's kind of the problem. Because this one is going to determine uh, how I have to think about the other stuff. I forgot that this, so let's look as well. Yeah, so it's mainly this one. So I have to understand how this cast works. Because the way that I'm gonna be able to do that depends on the way. Because essentially I have to figure out what types. So from the arguments that were passed as the data, what types are those arguments from, let's say? Or what types are they? And I have to think about, I have to see whether or not I have access to the names as well of the arguments. So I need to clarify more how this works. But I think that's it's probably better to. So I'm gonna keep this in mind. So puts. And that's basically what I have to do because the logic inside of the function has is going to depend on the types of arguments passed. If I want to allow, because it has to be this way because the data has to be dynamic. I think on this situation that I have there. Hey man, what's up? Global signals. Are you familiar with Godot? I've been coding for 3 years, probably more than 3 years now, almost 4 years. Yeah, 3 years and a couple of months, I think. So I'm gonna do this simple example first. This is another thing that I'm not really sure because I've seen, like based on the other registration, the other bind methods that they do, the name here of the argument's not the same. And I got this one, I think, from the example that they have on the documentation, and here is value, but then they put the p-value. So I think it doesn't matter that much, but it's kind of weird that it doesn't matter. So I don't understand very well because I haven't spent too much time uh, studying the macro to see how it works. The basic thing that I understood is that the first one is going to be the name of the function, and then whatever comes next are the arguments of the function. But I don't understand very well, especially the types, how it deals with the types. And so what I'm gonna do is create another class. This is the easiest way to test, I think. So I'm gonna search for the button class that they do. Then I'm going to create another class that inherits from that, which is gonna be a custom button that only has an extra function that is gonna emit the events. And the way that it's gonna emit events by calling this class here. But first I have to see what is the best way to, where is the best place to put this class here. So let me review if everything. Yeah, so this one, it passes the correct arguments here. Then this one, so it checks to see if it has, then checks, then loops over and calls, throws an error. If it doesn't work, so this one checks to see if there isn't the scope, it creates a new hash and puts on this. Oh, here's p scope. A good thing that I revealed. And then I put on the scope there. Then if it doesn't have the signal, I create the callable list there. And then I just push back. Yeah. So I think that's pretty much it. So now I have to see at what points. So the way that it is gonna work is just you just call this. Maybe we should just put global signal because it's easier. I'm gonna do global signal. Here. So now I think it's correct, everything. So I'm just gonna call from the other. So whenever you wanna subscribe, you just get the singleton. The same way that they do with the engine and everything else. And then you just call connect, global signal. Then you pass the scope, which is gonna be, in this case, a graph scope. Pass the signal name. I think I don't need to put another condition here to check. To see if the signal already, yeah. And then I pass the signal name, so the thing is, so the task function here is probably better to, I'm gonna change this. So I have to see, it's probably better to just do, because the way that I was thinking about it is just doing the mesh instance 3D, but I think that since the graph inherits, but the thing is I'm not gonna be able to see. Hmm. I was thinking about doing from the children, so this, it becomes more complicated. So let me think about it. So maybe I can do it. I'm not really sure if it makes sense to do it. I was thinking about doing a button and then adding a child, which would be a mesh instance 3D, and then moving the child, because I have to see, the idea is just create a button from the editor, and every time I click the button, move a mesh to the right, so I see if it's working or not. So if I just change this value, I'm not gonna be able to know. That's the problem. If the thing worked or not. But if I add, so maybe I should just, so I should get the children of this. So do essentially what I'm doing here and then move the children. So I'm gonna change the name. No, move child mesh. This is another thing that I just thought about, is that because on the example that I was seeing, I'm pretty sure I took this function for an example with the exact parameter here. So obviously I can search for this, but I was thinking about like why put node here? That's the thing. Because what I'm thinking about doing is just children 0, and then obviously the mesh instance 3D is going to inherit from node at some point in node 3D, and I think the functions related to the movement are on the node 3D class. But I wonder, because this is going to have the type, so I was thinking about doing the mesh instance 3D here. Okay, I guess I can just test to see what happens. Because I think that is the type of this function, so it's probably better to just leave node. But yeah, it's node here. Also, it casts through a mesh. Interesting. So yeah, this is from the object, and I guess I'm inheriting from node, so the base class is gonna be object, so I can use like this, just using dynamic cast. And then here I have to see how to change the position. So the idea that I have is just create. So I create the code here, then I put the node on the visualization through the editor, then I put mesh instance 3D as a child, and then I call I create another button, and then from the button the new button is going to be a new class as well. It's going to inherit from the normal button. We're just going to add another function that is going to call this global signals class. And it's going to do that from the singleton here. So would be move right, for example. And then here it would be, this data that I would pass would be related to the class that is calling the signal. Let's say I pass 5. I think that's, yeah. So just put this as, oh fuck. Didn't allow me to do Ctrl Z there. I'm gonna write again because I'm gonna have to write again. Hey, what's up, man? So in order to see where should I initialize this, I'm going to look for the engine initialization. I think I can find this Babes engine. It's probably going to be on the main setup. So it's right on the beginning, and I think I'm going to do this right after here. To just do the same thing. But engine is going to be a member variable of this, maybe. So I have to see because it's probably initialized outside somewhere. So just here. Because it's global variable, so use static. I think I can just copy here. So I have to change the name there because I think it makes more sense to put this as yeah. So I think that the name here only matters to initialize and then you access through the other notation there. Yeah. I'm just thinking about the name now because Global Signals is the best name to. I guess this name is the one that doesn't matter that much. Both names kind of don't matter that much because I'm always going to call from the function using the name of the class. So I think it doesn't matter if I put it like this because this one is only going to be used inside of the other functions. So hopefully it's not very confusing. I think ideally it would be better to have, like, to think about a different name. But I don't think it's worth spending a bunch of time on this. We're just gonna do this. Oh, it's doing here. Hmm. So I'm just gonna remove this one. I'm gonna see if it's easy to find how to move the mesh to the right. It's probably gonna be on Node 3D. I'm pretty sure I remember seeing some functions. So I think I don't need to understand the function. Just use. Yeah, they use this thing here. It's probably a vector. It's gonna multiply. Basically, the way that it works for transformations is just multiplication of matrices, because each matrix is gonna hold the state of each thing on the visualization. The camera is a matrix, and the only special thing about the camera is that everything is multiplied by the camera. So that makes it so you can see everything from the perspective of the camera. And then you have the other uh, matrix that never changes, which is the perspective projection, which has in it the calculations to create the illusion of 3D. And the other is the model matrix, which is going to be this one, I think. So this probably multiplies this vector here. So this class is probably going to have information about the vector with the matrix that is responsible for the model. But I don't know very well how where is the matrix here and how everything works on the shaders, because I haven't looked into this shader code yet. So probably rotation or translation is on the node, because there isn't anything here related to translation. Oh, translate here. I missed. So you just pass a vector. So create a vector there. Trying to see if there is the same initialization that I want to use there. So that's you decreases the chances that I'm gonna do a mistake there. So just basically passing the values. So I'm just gonna put the name, pass the values. I think I'm just gonna do it. And maybe no need. And then I connect to the event on the constructor. But first, before I do that, I'm gonna figure out what is the best place to. I'm gonna finish initializing the class there, the same way that the engine is initialized. And look into because it's kind of confusing. So basically, they use the mem_new there, but on the constructor of each one, they also have the singleton there. This constructor I got from ChatGPT, but it's pretty much the same way that they do on the other ones, which is just initializing the signal variable with this, and then they use the static variable to initialize the thing, and then they use mem_new to update the value, to allocate memory for the value, which is a static class, which means it's global and it's gonna have the same. It's always gonna be the same value. So the only thing I wanna remember is if they also do it like this, because this is one I got from ChatGPT, but I'm pretty sure that they do. So, and the other thing, let me see here. Well, I wanna see the constructor. So it has these things. So it's just a float. Maybe I should use this thing instead of float. Or just to make it easier, I'm just gonna do like this. And see if it works. So I'm just gonna close everything. And close this stuff. The engine is gonna be annoying because of these two different versions of the engine. Should look for the initialization, but I'm only looking for the engine because is the thing that I was gonna use. I was gonna do it inside of the engine first. I think it makes sense to copy the engine pattern here. Forcing line. I think it's just a variation of I'm not really sure. I have to look it up. But I remember seeing line stuff. So it's similar to a macro, but I don't know the difference. So the macro, it just copies the code, it's telling the compiler to replace the code as part of the function. It's just copying there. But I don't remember really well. I think it's a macro that they have there. I think they yeah, I remember seeing this at some point. So this is probably a built-in variable based on probably the compiler. So whenever there's shooter underscores here, I think that means that is a built-in variable. I'm just gonna search for this. Yeah, this is basically what I asked ChatGPT based on this other, because I was thinking about whether or not it makes sense to have two different engine classes, which it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Seems kind of redundant. And then it just graves this list of trade-offs here, and then I ask to see what it thinks about. Instead, yes, consolidating engine class. But it might be problematic because of different platforms and stuff like that. So I wanted to know what reason do they have for creating these classes. Because I imagine that, like, as you're building things, like, it could be a situation where you're just facing, like, you have so many problems and then you're just trying to fix this thing because you had a problem here or there. And then the way you found it was this way, but it wasn't maybe the best way to do it. So it might be because of that, or it might be because, like, it's just a design choice or something like that. Let's see what ChatGPT thinks. Compiler-specific directive use should suggest or force the compiler to inline the function at the call site rather than generating a separate function call. So basically, when you call the function, it just replaces the code that was inside of the function in the place you call the function. And macros is for tax substitution. It's kind of similar, but not the same. I already looked into all of this. The Godot's documentation, everything. So so I was gonna look into this engine menu engine. I'm just gonna copy. So copy here, but for the name that I did there. Actually, I should just press F12. All those signals. And I should. So let me see where they include the engine. It doesn't. So it probably includes the engine somewhere that includes here. Hmm. I'm just gonna include here in the top, or maybe actually before all of these other ones. It's probably gonna rearrange this. Should be in the middle somewhere. I'm gonna put the path there. I think it's core, then object. Yeah. No, I was building something for the. I was trying to build a graph visualization. Basically, this thing here. I built this thing on the front end to visualize. This one, it visualizes the abstract syntax tree, nodes of the abstract syntax tree from a simple Python file. And I think it's just a part of the Python file. And yeah, when I did this, it's very slow here. That's the problem. And I also didn't like, because I did this on React, and I didn't like how, like, I have to focus on a bunch of stuff related to React instead of focusing on the stuff that I was trying to do. So, uh, yeah, basically that's why. Yeah, but I learned C++ before, true, just because it just makes sense, I think. So, obviously everything comes from assembly, then C, then C++. So it makes sense to, like, I always wanted to learn all these other languages. So that's why I learned Rust as well, just to see what it's like. And then, but I stopped there. But now the main reason is to build something that is a lot faster, and I don't have to think about the browser. So just basically trying to translate this stuff here using Godot instead. Yeah. So let me look into this constructor here. I was gonna look into the singleton. So so this is the thing, they use this struct here. I'm pretty sure. I think they also use the variable. Yeah, so here. So it's pretty much the same. Basically the same thing. And then I remember that. So on the initialization, they probably do the same thing. Just make equal to this. Yeah, so I think this is correct. And let's see also the get singleton there. Yeah, so it's the same thing. And there's a problem here because probably because of the name. Yeah, what the fuck's going on? I don't know why he's not going to the definition, but maybe it's a VS Code thing. Maybe it's because it's private. See here. Right here. Oh, so I need to have this there as well. the thing that I erased. So I don't know why it works like this though. So I both need to have here and there. And the constructor is here. I'm gonna do the same way that they do there, just to oh, this is initializing the variable. That makes sense. So you initialize on the main, the actual class, and then here you're initializing the variable for the engine. And the reason why you do this is because it's a static variable. So here you're coupling the true on the constructor. So the moment you use memnew, it just makes it stores the stuff on the memory pool and then creates the pointer to this variable. So it's basically linking those two pointers to the same place in memory, I think. I don't know what's b.ing. Doesn't teach me web dev. It's an elective I can take for a year. All obvious engineering, physics, mechanics, etc. Done tons of hardware programming with C. The C++ course I mentioned before was also an elective, or C++ and JavaScript. Are not part of the accredited software engineering program. C++ and JavaScript. Yeah, but for someone that knows hardware, web development's very easy, and it's gonna be taken over by AI anyway. So obviously, the more not sure how to say that, repetible. The more you can do something easily, the quicker it's gonna be replaced by AI, obviously. So like on one extreme, you have actual code, which is the program you do, just repetitive tasks, just actual code. There's no intelligence. The other end of the spectrum is something very high variance. And then the evolution of computation is just closing the gap. And I hate formal education, because the purpose of formal education is to enslave you, not to make you think. So it doesn't really matter anyway what people teach. It matters only on the context that you have the paper, which is the degree, so that other people can have some confidence that you know what you're doing, but it doesn't actually matter for when it comes to actually knowing things from my point of view. Very easy to say that since low level is always assumed to be harder, but I find programming microcontrollers 1,000% easier than coding in React or PHP, CSS, JS. Nah, I don't know. It's gonna be harder from the standpoint of the styling of things, but it's not actually harder. So if you think it is harder, it's probably because of the way you're perceiving the things because of JSX, but it's pretty much the same thing. So if you're capable of seeing a data structure instead of just seeing the JSX stuff. The other thing that makes it harder is that there's a bunch of black boxes, which is another massive problem because nobody explains the black boxes on the documentation. So this can be another massive problem. So this part can be hard, but it's not hard in the sense that it's hard to program this stuff. It's hard in the sense that it's hard to understand what the compiler is doing or the other things. But yeah, I guess it can be hard. It can be hard to understand how everything comes together. That part can be hard, I think. But actual coding, the page is not hard. So like understanding how everything's connected, like the protocols and how the browser is gonna do a bunch of things under the hood, and then what's happening when it comes to that part, then I agree that part is hard. But actually coding, like from the superficial level of the just writing JavaScript and CSS, I think it's a lot easier than writing C and C++. Professors specialize in real-time distributed systems, which there aren't many books on, so I'm getting a quality education that is hard to find. Very good at OP in Java, right? OP JS, React code doesn't feel the same. It doesn't feel the same just because the JSX, because it's pretty much the same thing. Because React is just a tree, so it's just gonna be like a bunch of functions inside of objects. That's basically what it comes down to. The part that becomes confusing is that you don't, and this is the problem with the documentation and stuff, because like no one explains what is actually happening inside of the structures, and then that's the hard part, because then it becomes a bunch of black boxes that you just have to believe that they're doing something. So for example, when you use React, the React DOM in the main application there, and then connecting that with the HTML, like there's no explanation of what is actually going on, how is the parsing being done, how is the parsing connected to everything else, how does the HTML is going to connect with JavaScript to hydrate the page, what does hydration means, how does the request between the server and the client is going to work, what are the protocols used, how the browser is going to communicate with that. Those parts are hard, but it's not because they're harder to learn than C++ and hardware. It's just because there's you can't, there isn't an easy way to access them. So yeah, so that part is hard, but the code I found it much harder. I found C++ much harder to think about than JavaScript and CSS. So what I'm gonna do now? I think that's for the initialization. That's it, probably. And now, yeah, now I have to think about the others, like these classes here. That's actually the part that is the most frustrating when you're learning, because after you learn how it works, like you realize how much time you spend just trying to figure out, like if someone explained the parts, like, it's not actually hard to understand. It's just that like you have to reverse engineer everything to learn. This is kind of a problem, because the documentation just talks about the like superficial stuff. Also, the other harder part about JavaScript is that it's confusing by nature, I think, because of the way that they structured the language. So that the parts that is the, but this part is also related to C++ because it's pretty much the same thing. It's just a fundamental pattern of programming, which is just understanding the callbacks and the event cycles. Those parts are very hard as well. But if you understand C++, then I assume that you understand those things. So it should be a lot easier to understand JavaScript later. Yeah, the build system as well. In C++ is a pain in the ass. It's a lot harder to figure everything out. JavaScript, you just put a command and then everything happens, and Python as well. The C++ is really annoying. The debugger as well, it's very hard. So let me think about this. Oh yeah, I was gonna connect, so I have to connect here. So I have to, it's gonna be core objects, global signals. Then here, the way I wrote down there. So this is one I'm gonna be. It's gonna be based on the. Actually, I'm just gonna subscribe the. And now I just realized I'm putting the thing here, but it's supposed to be a function. It's supposed to be the callable actually. So. Oh, you pass the callable as a macro here, so it's gonna be callable. And I have to import, so I'm gonna see where this comes from. No, I don't even know what functors are. I have to go to the bathroom. I'll be right back. STL is the standard library, probably. It's based on the name there. Lets you call functions like objects and also use them. It's kind of hard to see. Oh, I think should pass an argument, show another function to modify its behavior. Oh, I think I've heard about this, but never used this. So the context would be this. So it's better to just use an example, but I think it's just gonna be the graph and the name of the function. Similar to lambdas in functional programming. Lambdas I've heard. So according to this guy, that's he has a bunch of very good videos. Fuck, I forgot the name. Yeah, but I'm sure if I search for a weekly with Jason Turner. So according to this guy, lambdas are the most difficult part on C++. And you can learn all of the concepts on C++ by studying lambdas. So one thing that I'm thinking about now is I don't know very well the relationship between like, at what point is this gonna be like because I think what shows up there, yeah, what shows up in the editor is not actually the class itself. It's just a representation of the class, maybe. Because one thing that I can do is obviously create another function on this that adds a child. Not really sure if we can. I can see there if it is a virtual function and I can override. So that's like yeah, but that wouldn't make sense. So I think that this makes sense. Because this it doesn't depend on the it only depends on the child on the function. So yeah, I think I'm tripping. But it's still confusing to understand the relationship between the constructor of the classes and like at what point I think the constructor runs when you add the node to the tree. That would make the most sense. But then how does that work? Because you're obviously building the scene from the editor, and I think that's the part that is different. So I do think that the editor runs the constructor of the node when you add because it has shown the viewport there. And then, but then it's only going to use that to store the information on the file, and the engine is going to read from the file instead. And then based on that, it's going to create the scene tree based on the scene files. But I'm not really sure. Oh, I have to put graph here. That's why it's not showing there. Also, probably change the name. Oh, I already put it there. Yeah. Also, this should be a vector as well. And so actually, I shouldn't be putting the. Maybe it's easier to test like this first. It just puts this here. So now I think probably the other stuff related to the engine doesn't matter that much. So this is just the other struct that they use. So they use this to keep track of the performance apparently. Got single down. So I'm gonna test this first, then after I'm going to create the other node, just gonna be a button, and then I can see from the editor. So I have to see if it compiles first. I have to put float. This is the other thing I was gonna do. Yeah, now everything seems to be fine. So the other part's going to be emitting the events, and for that I have to create another one. So I think it's probably better to test. Hopefully everything goes fine. I don't remember if I changed something else as a problem. There's a problem already. It's on the header. Oh, it's because I put this here, so that should be public, I think. Hmm. So this is... No, it has here. Here is private. So what is going on? Oh, I'm using engine there. So it's basically because of that thing. So this I wasn't sure as well. Basically, so I had some problems at some point with the translation units, which is another annoying thing about C++, which is something that I think it could be changed, and that's probably the reason why Rust exists or other languages. Is an annoying thing about Rust, but probably they had their reasons obviously for doing this. So like this is called for forward declaration, and the reason why you do this is I think that the main reason is to decrease the chances of circular imports, or because there's some situations of translation units where, like basically this macro here, this macro prevents the header file from being included twice. So you can imagine you have two different C++ files and they both include this header file. Then what would happen is that you would have the same declaration or the same definition. So if you define a function, the problem is the definition. So a function can't have two different definitions. I'm not really sure about the declaration, if you can have two different declarations, but I think it's probably not. Even if it's possible, it's probably not a good idea. So in order to prevent that from happening, you can put this macro here. So this macro prevents the thing from being included on multiple different files, but the trick about this is that it only prevents on the same translation unit. And what translation unit means is just a C++ file with all the header files that it depends on. So this macro here doesn't prevent the header from being included twice if you have separate C++ files. If it is included on separate C++ files, I think. And this is the problem, because this is probably something that happens a lot. And the reason why this happens is because the steps of compilation of C++, the C++ files are not aware of each other at the stage that the macros are, at the preprocessing stage, which is this resolution here. So it's if you define functions on the header, then usually you're gonna have this problem where you have the same you have two definitions because the macro only works for the same translation unit. And usually you're gonna have multiple translation units, and you're gonna include the header on the different translation units. And the reason why I don't like this on C++ is because I think that it could be changed if the stepping process, the compilation process was changed, but then obviously it can be like a very complex and there might be like stuff that I don't know. But one thing that I thought about was just like you could encode some information on the preprocessing stage that allowed the definitions to be resolved based on this information. So you could create a hash or something like that, and then based on that, you figure out whether or not you have only one header file for all the C++ files, or if you have the definition for multiple translation units, more than one definition for multiple translation units. But basically, in order to decrease the chances that this happens, you usually are recommended to use this for declare. You just declare the type on the file, and then C++ can figure out, because you are including the headers on the C++ file, to avoid this problem with the translation unit thing. So usually I think this is a pattern that people do, but I'm not 100% sure here, and it's showing an error, so I'm not really sure, because on the other files, they do this, or they import stuff instead of forward declaring, but not always. So it's kind of one of those things where it's probably going to depend on the context because the gradients, so as it reflects the geometry of the solution reflects the variance of data. So it's basically, so here, for example, they're forward declaring typed array, but they also include a bunch of stuff. So it's complaining about the enum. So maybe it's because it's an enum, but I'm not really sure. So I'm just gonna see if I can go to the definition with F12 there. And here I think that it doesn't really matter what happens later because like the main thing is done. You just initialize the global thing there, and then I can use on this thing. I'm just gonna access, so I think I can close this. So it's gonna look into this thing. So where is this defined? Oh, it's probably not a class. Is that's why. So I'm defining as a class, but it's a. I'm forward declaring as a class, but it's an enum. Yeah. So this is the issue. So I should probably. So let me see. Because I don't think I included this on the engine there. Yeah, so here they are for declaring as well. Oh no, this is my thing. Yeah, so they are not for declaring anywhere. So maybe it's better to just include there. Because I need that type on the header. So what I was gonna see is just gonna search for this file, just see where they include this. Maybe just search on the engine. It's mainly the object because I'm copying the functions from the object class. Doesn't have anything. Yeah, but this is not anything. It could be some of these other ones. It doesn't have anything, so probably the best thing to do is just include the header. Probably one of these is gonna. I'm gonna do the way that I'm doing there and just put the includes on the thing, on the C++ file. Let's see what happens. Actually, I should have this first. Hmm. So here the for declare. Oh, this is my file. I think they just include from the one of those other things there. So list is another one. Maybe because I'm including the object, I don't need to include these other files. These errors don't mean anything because they show up because I'm using Godot uses scones, so VS Code doesn't know about the files. But I'm gonna try to compile without including them because I think I'm including the object file on the other on the header, so maybe it's not necessary to include. The error is probably necessary. Let's try like this. Also, it has to be, yeah, because I forgot core objects. It has to be from the root global signals. Hmm, that's interesting. So why does it think is a... I'm using children, should be using mesh. Yeah. So yeah, should be mesh here. So what is the other error? So it's probably the constructor I'm having as private, so I'm gonna look into the engine to see. So the engine is public. I'm just gonna copy Oh, it's H. So here. This is the problem because I don't have the thing there. Let me think. Because this should be related to the. Obviously, I'm registering the class, the graph class with the class DB, so it shouldn't be that. Oh, it's probably because I'm not including the file. Class DB. But it should be including, because I am including the object. I guess I'm gonna try that first. Let's see what happens. Like the object uses the thing, so you should inherit. But maybe I have to. But I am including the. I'm including the global signals, and then this one is including the object. So maybe that's not the problem here. I don't think that the include is the problem. So let me think. Oh, so I need to make it a front class. That's probably the reason. Because here is making it a front class. So it comes after before the public. Not sure if this is referred to the because like it should be the this type here. So I'm not really sure if it's referred, but the node also. I'm pretty sure the node has objects there. It might be just because of the class DB thing, but but this is kind of weird. I'm not really sure if this error here is because of the front class, because obviously I'm inheriting from objects on this one, so it should be a yeah, but I think it doesn't matter. Maybe it matters because I'm declaring the functions at this level, so I have to review this again. But the problem is that this kind of things I don't think I'm gonna be able to find videos. So I have to think about a way to search this to clarify. So what is the relation between the levels of the class hierarchy in the front classes on each level. I think it has to be like the higher to lower. That wouldn't make sense. So you need to probably declare on the actual class, I think. Because otherwise, but maybe not. Because maybe it makes sense to, like, if you declare a class as a friend on the base class, and all the other classes that inherit from the class are also friends of the. But I'm not really sure how to ask this. So maybe derived are derived classes. So if a base abstract class defines a friend as obviously I'm gonna try there, and then doesn't work, I'll just think about it. So it's not inherited. So that's probably the reason there. I forgot the callable. And this is probably because of the callable. So let me run again and see if the same. I also had this, I think this, I'm not really sure if this is an error or warning, but I had this multiple times on different projects. And it's very annoying because the C++ errors are not very good. So in C++ and C, you have to be, like, you are responsible for creating a logging system. So I have to figure out, or to use the functions that they use on Godot to see if I can make the. But I'm not really sure if the logging system, like, the logging system is not directly related with the errors, so. But obviously it helps because you can print stuff to see what's going on. So this is the issue. I'm comparing the. Yeah, so like on the hash map, there inside of the sense function, they're gonna use the equal operator, which I think is overloaded, and then they compare the right-hand side with the left-hand side to see if it has or not. And I think it does a lookup or something like that. So this is the problem because I'm using a string to check. Because I thought this was the. I'm pretty sure that they use this function to check whether or not a hash map has a string. But I think in the case that I have the nested dictionary or nested hash map, I can't use this. So I have to think about how to. I do remember that I've seen somewhere here that they also use a nested hash on some place. And I think that I just copied from them. The one that I did there, just changed the types. But I have to remember now where do I found that? Or where did I find that? This hash size. And then I need to see if the nested hash is gonna have somewhere where It checks to see if there is a key. Or I can think about a different way to test, just say. The problem is that I can't really search here because it depends on the types, obviously. So I'm not really sure what's the best way to find the place where I'm pretty sure they use also here. No, here. Yeah, it's just not also here. And this is a nested hash. Config files. So I have to see if they use this somewhere. If they check that if this hash has a value or not. So I'm pretty sure that I got from this exactly this situation here. So I'm not really sure why. Oh, it's because I'm using. Am I using directly? Oh, I am using directly here. Hmm. So what is going on? The only difference is that here is a string and I'm using a string name. So obviously I can test to see if I change the thing there. Also, I need to use this one instead of the one that I'm using there. But here they also do like this. So what is the difference? I think I'm just gonna leave the way that I'm adding the new values in that way because it's not giving any error, I think. Maybe because of this condition here that they can do this. But here's the and so the only explanation should be the type here. It's the only thing that makes sense. I'm gonna just run again to see if the other errors go away and then I think about this. But the only explanation should be the type here, because that's the only difference that it has. I guess I can look for other examples to see. If there are other places where it does the same thing. This is basically the same. So this, oh, it's because I probably have to declare it here. And maybe I have to include the file, but like, it's kind of weird because on the object they should have. So maybe it's something else there. So as maybe one of these header files here. Oh, they are using this thing here, so it should be this, but I think they don't use because they just copy there. So what's up with that? I just copied this one, so it shouldn't be necessary on this thing here. But the thing is, it's different because they are not subscribing the object to the class DB. So the node is more similar when it comes to that. Hmm. But why do I have the class DB in the first place now? Because these functions, I mean, maybe I should remove. But the thing is, like, if I want to at some point, because I am like I do have to register, I think. So if I register, then I need access to the class DB. That's a problem. Because I think that the issue is the friend class here for some reason. Like the issue is the relationship between this and the macro. Because the object doesn't use the macro, but then the node doesn't use the doesn't have the friend class. So this is the problem. But I'm not really sure why. I'm not really sure if this is the problem either. It's just what I'm thinking about now. So this is just used of undefined type, but that doesn't make a lot of sense. Maybe but if I remove from here, then I'm gonna have the error there. Because it should be coming from this. I think this error here is probably because of the other ones. Or actually, I forgot the thing here. So this is probably the problem. Yeah, maybe maybe that was the problem. Yeah, because of the syntax. Obviously, this is definitely the problem. One of the problems, but I'm not really sure if it's gonna solve the other stuff. Oh, signal callback here. Signal callback here. Here's the signal. Hmm. So let me run again and see if some of these errors are gonna be solved. This is the one that is definitely not gonna be, I think. I think it's showing here because I changed there. But it should be this one. This one calls this other one, and I think this one is the one that compares. So just gonna see if the hash has the position. Just search for the key. But the key should be, so maybe I'm gonna run it again just to see. But it is kind of weird because the key should be a string name. So it shouldn't matter. But obviously the value is gonna be another hash. But if the other code is using the same function to check there, then I don't see why there should be an error. That is an error. Again, use of undefined type. Hmm. So now let me. I think it's not because of the forward declare thing, because I'm including the file. So it's unlikely to be the case. The problem is if I remove from here, then it fucks up the functions. Maybe it does. Because the thing is, even if I remove the stuff related to your class DB, which is just this thing here that I copied from the other one, not really sure if I'm gonna need at some point. Because maybe at some point I'm gonna try to integrate this with the scripting languages as well. So the issue is that I'm gonna use the macro, but then I have to use the front class. But the definition should be coming from the object. Hmm. I think no, it shouldn't be because I'm using object, because this one subscribes with object. So one thing that I can do is just stas. So I just remove and then remove the stuff related to class DB there. Or like comment this stuff out. Maybe it might be because of this, but I don't think it's I don't think it's this. Oh, I think no, declarations. Let me just copy here to make sure that I'm doing. Right. Is something weird going on with this thing here? It might be because of the protected thing, or it might be because of the forward declarations. The thing Like, I should try to just comment everything out because maybe everything's coming from the. Just realize that everything because the object uses the same stuff. And then there is this stuff here. It could be because of this static. I don't think that it needs to be static because the class itself is going to be static. But I'm not really sure if that's the problem. Hmm. It might be just because I'm using the value that the thing has is different than the example there. Because this is even though it's a nested hash, is from string invariant. So I might have to figure out. But if I use another thing, it's gonna be annoying. Hmm. So obviously, I think it's not ideal though if I decouple them. It would be a lot easier, that's for sure. But then increases the chances of making a mistake. But I think it makes a lot easier. One thing that I can do is just test. So I'm gonna run again to see if the other errors uh, go away. But now I'm thinking about how can I change there? If I have to change, then how can I change? Because if I can't use a nested hash map to do the thing, then either I'm gonna have to separate into two different variables, and then I have to rethink the functions, or I'm going to I have to spend more time studying the function there, I think. I still the undefined class DB thing. Which is weird. So I guess one thing that I can do is just look at the nodes and copy the stuff that the node does. Hmm. The thing is that's the node. So maybe one of these things is gonna include the object. It's not gonna be like if I search for the include here, then it's gonna be annoying to see like in the context of the node. Maybe if I just search for the yeah, but if I include only the files, it doesn't make a lot of sense. I'm trying to understand why like there's something weird going on here with the macro. Is I'm doing exactly the same way, so like the first thing that I'm thinking about is that it should be the includes, the way that I'm including the files. So that's why I'm looking here, but I think here it doesn't make a lot of sense. It's not gonna be very good because it is like probably including somewhere, like some of these files are probably somewhere including the object, and that's how the node knows what the object type is. But here it is doing basically the same way that I'm doing there, so that's the weird thing. Unless I'm missing something really obvious. So I don't understand why. So it must like the only logical explanation that I can think of is the include, or probably one of the files is including somewhere, but the object should be like including something that allows the class DB to be resolved. And I'm not using class DB on the other functions anymore. Hmm. Oh, it could be because of I have to bind the methods as well. Yeah, maybe these errors are related to because I have to bind the methods if I use the macro. So the question is, do I need to use the macro? I think I probably don't need to use the macro. But this is the thing. I think that the reason why I put the macro is because I'm not really sure, like, it's from the editor standpoint. But I think just for the class standpoint, it doesn't make sense to put the macro. Because it's not supposed to be, like, it is a singleton, so it's not supposed to be, I think, a class, like a part of the visualization. It's more like a class like an engine or something like that, or just outside of the thing. So like I don't even think that it makes sense to inherit from the objects as well. So this is the thing. But then the problem is if I don't do it like this, then how do I interact with the class from the editor? I think that's the issue that I was thinking about. I do think that it makes more sense for the class to not be part of the should not be registered in class DB and should not inherit objects. But then if I do this, the challenge is going to be how do I like is it necessary to change this class from the editor? Or how do I access this class from the editor? That's the question. But I guess what I can do is just remove and then see. Because I'm pretty sure that the engine is not. The engine doesn't use the GD class, pretty sure. It doesn't inherit from anything. I think main loop and scene tree is pretty much the same. Oh no, main loop inherits. So maybe scene tree inherits as well, but it's more because they are parts of the. So the question is, does it make sense for the global signals to be parts of the thing? For the signals inside of the object, it does make sense because object is the base class. So it does make sense for that because that's gonna be like it's gonna be the whole point of the thing. Like each object is a part of the tree. But for the global signals, I'm not really sure if it makes sense to put as parts of the because the whole point of the global signals is that is one centralized point where that connects everything that is external to the sync tree. But it might make sense to make it as a to inherit from object. But it might be And maybe I have to, no, I don't have to declare functions from thing. It might be because there's the, it could be because of the bind methods that I'm getting all these errors. So like I have two options. One obviously is figure everything out. Like figure all these errors out or remove the thing. And it's gonna come down to whether or not it makes sense for the global signal to be parts to be an object or not. I think that probably it doesn't because the way that I'm looking at it is more like is the engine. Uh, Maybe I think that the engine does like the second version of the engine maybe it does inherit from, or maybe the first one inherits from. The first one binds methods, so maybe it does inherit. So probably makes sense to be parts. So it does inherit, and so it does make sense. So maybe this is the reason why they separated the two. Yeah, but I don't think that's the reason why they separated the two classes. Because if that was the reason, then probably this one wouldn't be. It might be though. I'm not really sure. Hmm. So the reason for these problems might be because of the way that I don't think it is the way that I'm implementing bind methods. So I'm not really sure. So because this one is gonna, because now I don't have anything that is related to class DB on the implementations. And this one is also using the macro just maybe I can try to just copy this stuff here and see what happens. It might be because of I'm using some stuff here that the object doesn't have. Or this have here. Hmm. So why is this showing up? Maybe there is a class with this name, but I don't think that's the case. It's just the stuff that I put here. No, I comment it out. Because this is not related to the other stuff. And I comment everything out, I think. On the bind methods. I'm not really sure. I'm gonna have to spend a bunch of time thinking about this. So probably what I'm gonna do is fix these errors. And I'm gonna... Oh, so it is... No, this... No, it is using here. So it might be this. But I think this is not related to the other stuff. Might be, but... the main thing that is confusing to me is this class DB thing. 'Cause I think there's something going on with the macro. but I'm not really sure. It might be related to the way that I'm including things. I don't think it's anything that I did here because it doesn't use class DB. But I am gonna have to think about, even after, like, if I make it happen like this, I'm gonna have to think about how I'm gonna do this. If it, like, because probably I am going to be required to use class DB on this class at some point. I don't think I don't wanna. I just wanna make it work for C++, but maybe somewhere along the line, down the line, I'm going to try to integrate this class with the scripting languages, or try to. I don't think I'm gonna try to integrate with the scripting languages, but I am going to try to probably at some point change the values of this class from the editor somehow, so I don't have to recompile every time that I wanna do something with signals. Probably with scripting as well. Hmm. I also have to understand. So this one, it might be because of the types that I'm using and not the equal operator. Oh, this is the issue. It's because when you're comparing with a hash map, but it's kind of weird because the other one is also an nested hash map. So actually, this is kind of weird. I think that like just intuitively, what makes sense is that the reason why I'm getting the error with the nested hash map on my case and it doesn't get the error on the config file is just because of the types that I created the hash map with, because they use the variant. They use string and then this variant. So one thing the first thing that I'm gonna try is probably use string instead of string name, and then I'm gonna try to figure out why when you use string name doesn't work. If that works, then if that doesn't work, then it's probably because I'm using callable and I'm using a list. So either I have to think about, like, either I think there's three different options. Either I figure out another data structure to use that allows me to encode the same information, the scope, the signal, and the list of callables. Or I just split into two different things, and then I check both of them on the functions, which is not ideal, I think. Or the third option is just to figure out inside of the classes why the error is happening. But yeah, based on the display here, it should be because of I'm using comparing. At some point, the hash map is gonna compare this string name with this list of callable. So now the other errors are gone. So I guess the errors because of the macro were because of the other stuff. So I think it is related to the includes. I think probably to solve these ones is probably not going to be that difficult. Just include stuff, but the class DB might be very difficult because of the friend class thing. So it might be very annoying to figure that out. I think it's probably better to make it work first in the simplest way possible. Then I think about these other problems. So I'm gonna leave it like this probably and try to solve this other one here. So this now is showing a different place. So maybe it's just the way that I'm doing this here. So probably it is this stuff here. Yeah, so what I have to do is probably use the insert. So I have to insert the string first. Now let me think. But I think the error is this, not this. So is the way that I'm initializing this and then creating the new value on the hash map. So this should be easier to solve. So hopefully I can use the same data structure and just change the way that I'm adding here. Probably what I have to do is just use insert instead of making it equal. Yeah, I'm gonna think about this. But if I solve this one, then I think I'm just gonna leave it like this, the simplest way possible. Then the next thing that I'm gonna do is just create the other class. It's gonna be a custom button, and then I'm going to think on the constructor of the button, I'm just gonna use this class here to emit. Not in the constructor actually. I'm gonna see on the normal button how they do it on the editor. So there's this button class which they always do. They always use for everything on the editor. And this class, what is it? Enum. Let me see if I can find. Actually, here, user. Hmm. Wasn't this a class? Basically, I'm just gonna copy the way that they do there. So it might be another one of these classes here that is responsible for like setting up the events. It's probably gonna be a control node. I think it has to inherit from the control, because the control is gonna be the one that has the virtual functions that are related to the events that are emitted by the window. So I'm gonna figure out. I'm just gonna go over with the debugger on the editor and then just figure out. Just clarify again the flow after you click the button, just see what happens, and then I create another class that is going to inherit from whatever class creates that functionality. And then I'm just going to add I'm just going to change the class so that it emits the global signal that I'm using there instead. And I'm going to see if it's with the same scope and the same name of the signal that I'm subscribing to on the graph. And then I'm gonna see. So first, I'm gonna create this thing here, this class on the scene from the editor. Then create a mesh instance 3D, put the mesh instance 3D as a child of this. Then create the other one as a sibling of the graph, and then create the logic of the button, and then just see what happens when I click the button to see if it works. So in my mind, what it should happen is that the button is gonna emit the signal using this class here, the singleton, which is going to have the scope, the name of the signal, and then the data. And then this function should receive that data and should move the mesh based on So you should move the mesh to the right because I think I'm gonna do a positive value. And obviously I could add to, so I could take the position that the mesh already has and then add the new position, but I think I'm just gonna do it like this first to see what happens. Then once I get to the point, then I think about it again, about the other stuff here. There's more, I think it's gonna be more complicated. Like even if I figure out the class to be there, there's still, I still have to think about whether or not it matters to enforce the order of things. So to make sure, for example, that the event's always connected first before you emit. So I have to think about if whether or not I'm gonna make this. But to be honest, I think probably not. Probably just gonna leave it as simple as possible because I don't think it matters that much because at the point that the thing loads, the nodes should already be on the thing. But it maybe usually the way that it works is that everything's connected on the constructor of the node, and then the main things that are going to emit probably are the control nodes that are the GUI elements. So usually the GUI elements emit the events, and the connect happen on the constructor of the nodes. It's pretty much the same thing here. Then if I think it's better to just spend time. If all of this works, then it's better to spend time instead of thinking about the disorder, trying to enforce the connection first, which I think it doesn't matter that much. I think what matters more is thinking about how to synchronize the data that I pass on the emit signal with the data that the functions that receive the signal are gonna have. Because I want to have the ability to just have one function that deals with an arbitrary amounts of information that is gonna come from the other function to update the state of this class so that I update the physics there. So once I make this happen, then I think I can, then I can go back to figuring out how to save the sync files. Then this is the last step, and then after I do that, I'm just gonna try to create everything from code, all the sync files, and then open from the editor and see if it worked. So yeah, so I'm just gonna continue the steps here. So see you next time.